FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 1/10/20. That's right. 2020. Man, 2019 ended with a bang, but so far this year, it's been even wilder and crazier, and it's going to get more so. Mark my words. We have this thing, some semblance of an election. It's going to be a Trump recoronation, and the left is just going to melt down. And they're just going to go crazy. And that will mark the demise of the Democratic Party. It will split up. Got some theories on this. Frank Vernuccio is with us now. And Frank, welcome back. Oh, and by the way, if you got any comments, what do you think 2020 holds for us? Just email us. KL@kerrylutz.com is the email address. Frank, Happy New Year. So I'm looking at these crazy people and
Happy New Year, Kerry. It's great to be with you. And you're absolutely right. The response to the taking out of Qasem Soleimani has been bizarre, to say the least. Let's look at the record. This individual killed 603 Americans. He killed thousands of other innocent civilians, and he was planning on doing the same in the coming year. It was absolutely incumbent upon whoever the chief executive was to protect America and innocent civilians by taking this guy out. The response, though, has been as though somehow protecting America from acts of terrorism is an act of war against Iran. Indeed, Kerry, you can easily make the case that any chief executive who didn't take Qasem Soleimani out would have been guilty of negligence.
Hey, you know what's amazing to me, honestly, Frank? I look at this guy and all he's done, and, you know, there's no moral equivalencies of evil. Evil gets committed by good people and by bad, but some bad people are evil to the core. And I would equate the deep state with that. They will kill and do anything necessary to maintain their power and achieve their objectives. And I will attribute that to radical Islamists. All right. And they both need to be wiped out. There is no moral equivalency, though. I looked at him. I said, what was this guy what was he doing still walking around? How come he wasn't taken out a long time ago? No tears are shed on my part. And look, you could say terrorism and war are the same. You know, that's what the left likes to do. No, terrorism and war are not the same. Yes, civilian populations do get terrorized in wars, and atrocities take place in every war. But assumingly, when you start the war, you're not out to commit atrocities. Terrorism, they commit atrocities from the get-go, and that is what they're all about.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And let's understand something else. And this does not get reported adequately enough or at all in most of the media, except on great programs like yours. Iran's terrorist reach is not restricted to the Middle East. It is worldwide, and that includes, by the way, the Western Hemisphere and the United States itself. Qasem Soleimani was one of the people involved in the attempted assassination of a Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. itself. Hezbollah has been active in Latin America. It is hand in glove with some of the drug cartels there. This was a clear, present, and immediate danger. And as I said before, it would have been negligent for President Trump or any other chief executive not to take him out. What it does reveal, however, is a fascinating psychological motive of the left in the United States. It's increasingly deranged. Part of the reason why we can't seem to have a more calmer, rational discourse between the left and the right in the United States, and in fact the right, the center on one side and the left on the other, is that the left is no longer dealing with reality. Their reaction to the taking out of Soleimani simply was an indication how irrational they have become. And Kerry, I want to throw something else in there as well. There is a growing and troublesome trend of anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party. It reared its head again with the Soleimani takeout reaction. The fact is, anytime the United States or Israel take steps to defend themselves, somehow or other, it's considered a very terrible thing. Let's look, for example, what happens when the Palestinians shoot multiple missiles at civilian targets in Israel. That's not condemned by the left. The minute the Israelis defend themselves by taking out the missile launch sites, well, somehow that's an act of aggression against the Palestinian people. Utterly bizarre, Kerry. Tells you a lot about the left. Increasingly, as socialism becomes part of the mantra of the Democratic Party in the United States, you're going to see anti-Semitism continue to rise. We know, for example, that Keith Ellison, the current Democratic Party Attorney General of Minnesota, former vice chair of the Democratic Party, was a known anti-Semite. There's been no rebuke about him from the Democratic Party. The party of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, again, this is a rising problem within the Democratic Party, and it increases as socialism increases. You cannot have socialist regimes, or you have not had socialist regimes, without concurrent rise in anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
It happened in the Soviet Union. It happened in Nazi Germany. Let's remember the real name of the Nazi Party was the National Socialist Party, and it's happening today in Venezuela.
Agreed. And I'm going to go one step further. The two main people, other than Pelosi, in the House spearheading the impeachment of Trump are Jerry Nadler and Adam Shifty Schiff, both fellow Jews, I might add. And my belief here, Frank, is they're being set up because it's going to fail. Then the Jews will be blamed. And then the intent is Jewish people will be purged from the Democratic Party. I think that is the setup here. That's what's going on. Whether Pelosi knows it or not, she's being played into it. And because impeachment cannot possibly prevail, we know that already. There's no question about it. And yet, hey, here it is.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. The company is focused on its Candelaria mine project in Nevada, where there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver. The Candelaria mine historically was the highest grade silver producer in Nevada, generating over 68 million ounces of silver at an amazing average production rate of over 1,250 grams per ton. The project has tremendous expansion potential as past drilling has outlined deeper, high-grade silver targets for future drill programs. Silver One is highly leveraged to the price of silver and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah, the nation is scratching its head in wonder at the bizarre actions of Nancy Pelosi, attempting to dictate to Mitch McConnell how the Senate trial is going to be held. It's completely unprecedented. It's completely without any.
It's deranged. It's deranged.
Verification.
It's completely. I say it's completely deranged. Right?
Yeah, it actually is. Nancy has a tiger by the tail and doesn't know how to let go. In the case of the Democratic Party, the most extreme and radical elements are the tail that's wagging the dog. This is not your father's Democratic Party any longer. Let's be blunt. Someone like a John Kennedy could not possibly succeed in today's Democratic Party. He would have to be a Republican.
Yeah, even in FDR, you go back far enough and can't figure out where they're coming from. So, the Democrats, their panties were all in a bunch, and they were predicting escalation, World War III. And what happened after we took out Soleimani? Basically, a little rocket barrage, a couple of mortar attacks here and there, but pretty much not much.
And once again, the mainstream media has been exposed as being totally not up to the job at all. Just as they attempted to tell all of us about Russian collusion, which turned out to be a complete farce, their reaction to what happened in the Middle East, their head was on fire. This is the start of World War III. You saw on CNN and MSNBC desperate attempts. This is it. We're going to war. And then, of course, nothing really happened of any consequence. You wonder how long the media has to go before people start rejecting it wholesale. We know that the trust in the media, as defined by Rasmussen and other polls, is down even below the level of trust in Congress, which is saying something. But yet they don't seem to change their course at all. We have to get to the realization at this point that sources like MSNBC, the CNN, the Washington Post are basically shills for the left wing of the Democratic Party and little more than that.
Yep, that is what they are. And, well, I think there's going to be a big wake-up call for the left come November of 2020. Frank, let me postulate something else to you. None of these candidates who are currently declared on the Democratic side have a prayer of winning. They are not legitimate candidates. They are being put up to it by the elites so that there will be a brokered convention and the real candidate will emerge from behind the curtain. And my opinion is it's going to be probably a governor, a Democratic governor of a Midwestern state or Pennsylvania. There's two people I have in mind, but there could be others. Tim Walz, who is currently governor of the great state of Minnesota, where the Democrats are in danger. They know if they don't win Minnesota, they're toast. And Tom Wolf, who is governor of Pennsylvania. And again, if they lose Pennsylvania, they're toast. So I don't believe, Frank, that any of these candidates are really going to be the final candidate. I think this is a setup. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know how they're doing it, but it's very Machiavellian because if you look at the candidates, now Bloomberg is supposedly number 3. Well, who does Bloomberg appeal to? Biden's votes. So Biden's split. He can't win. And him and Buttigieg, all three of them, they split the so-called middle of the Democratic Party. And then you have Bernie and Lizzie and a couple of others splitting up the liberal votes. Between all of them, none of them are going to get enough delegates. And then the real fun begins.
The problem with all that, and I think it's totally plausible, but the problem with all that, of course, is that the enthusiasm generated by people like Bernie Sanders and even Warren, their backers are going to feel rather betrayed if that occurs, which means that they might not come out to the extent the Democrats want them in the November election. That's the box the Democrats have put themselves into. They've appealed to the worst elements of their own party, but the candidates that division wants simply can't win in November. And when it comes to the Bernie supporters, and let's face it, there are quite a bit of them within the Democratic Party, if in fact Bernie does that sort of thing occurs, if there's a brokered convention, the Bernie supporters are going to take a look at that and say, interesting. Back in 2016, we know they're going to say that the Clinton campaign engaged in a number of very dirty tricks in a number of jurisdictions, a number of primaries, to ensure that Bernie Sanders didn't win those primaries. Now in 2020, they're going to say Bernie was a popular candidate, and despite that, and despite the fact that he fought in the primaries and did somewhat well with the left wing of the party, he's being denied again. I think that's going to turn off a lot of people on the left, if in fact there is a brokered convention. But your major point, though, is correct in that there's no one out there of the Democratic candidates that have a chance of winning the nomination that could possibly win in November. Now, it's interesting. The strongest candidates the Democrats have is the one that has garnered the least in terms of popular imagination within the Democratic Party. Tulsi Gabbard, I believe, is probably the strongest candidate the Democrats have. She's got no real chance of winning the nomination.
No, she has no shot. No, she's been exposed as a Russian asset here, Frank. You can't, her and Trump, they get together in the White House and they conspire on how to screw over America. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, and by the way, one of the things that I think the voters are going to start raising their eyebrows at, if you followed, as I unfortunately had the responsibility to, the Democratic primary debates, good gosh, was that a snooze fest? There was practically no mention whatsoever of foreign affairs. It's as though the United States somehow ejected itself from planet Earth and went into orbit someplace around another star. But with North Korea and Iran and what the Chinese and the Russians are going to be doing in the next year, foreign affairs is going to be quite important, and yet the Democrats have no cred whatsoever in that area. By the way, prediction, during 2020, look for the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the North Koreans to do everything possible to embarrass President Trump. They desperately do not want to see him back in office.
Yeah, well, guess what? It ain't going to work. They're toast. And that's the fact of the matter. There's nothing they can do to stop it. And the more sane thinking members of the party, which is definitely a minority, already know this. But hey, they're going to find out, the rest of them. They all think that Trump is so easy to beat. Wrong. Not going to happen. But that's my opinion. I said, Frank, when Trump was elected in 2016, that he would be reelected in 2020. And regardless what happens with the Bernie voters and all that, they will never allow him to get the nomination for Democrat candidate, Democrat nominee. They can't afford to do it because the guy is off the wall. He's worse than McGovern was in 72. He's a guaranteed loser. Bernie's not a winner. He's 80 years old and pumping on not all his arteries here. And it's just never going to happen. But anyway, Frank, hey, we got to run, but tell us where we find you, where we read your work.
Terry, thanks for asking. We're at usagovpolicy.com.
All right. There's a link in the show notes to this interview. Appreciate it. Questions, comments, email us kl@kerrylutz.com. Twitter feeds at Kerry Lutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Visit our home site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Frank, you be well. We'll talk to you soon.
Terry, I look forward to our next discussion.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.